morning, girls and boys and teachers who've joined us once again. Welcome back to the Council's virtual learning series. In today's session for English Literature, ICSE, we will be studying Act 4, Scene 1 of The Merchant of Venice. In the very first slide, I would like to show you what we will be doing in this session today. We'll begin with a brief introduction, an overview of the scene, that is Act 4, Scene 1. We will then go on to study some important extracts from the scene, and I'd like to follow that with a few tips on how to answer questions. After this, we will look at a few ideas for assignments, and then we will wrap it up with a question and answer session. Now, by way of introduction, I would like to tell you, first of all, that this is the longest scene in the play. At 470 lines, it is almost as long as the entire Act 1. But what makes it exciting is not just that it is the longest scene, it is also the most dramatic, the most intense, and easily the most memorable scene in this entire play. Perhaps it's one of Shakespeare's most memorable scenes. Now, this scene is called the trial scene or the pound of flesh scene. As you can see on the screen in this slide, I put in a picture that's taken a still from a movie based on this on the play. It's called the trial scene because there you have Antonio on trial. He's being held back and held down, and there you have Shylock brooding over him, ready to claim his pound of flesh. Now, this is the only scene in the play where all the major characters appear together at the same time on stage. You have Antonio, who is on trial for his life. We also have Gratiano and Bassanio, his friends, who are there to be with him at his side in his hour of need. Portia and Nerissa are also present because Portia has come there disguised as a young lawyer, and accompanying her is Nerissa as lawyer's clerk. We have the Duke as arbitrator, and we also have Shylock, the antagonist, rubbing his hands in glee and waiting to claim his pound of flesh. This scene explores the theme of mercy versus justice. Now, this is a theme that underpins the action of the whole play. And it is in this scene that the theme is explored most fully. Now, in our next slide, I'd like to walk you through very quickly through the events of Act 4, Scene 1. In yesterday's session, we saw in Act 3, Scene 2, we saw not only did Bassanio make his choice, but also in the aftermath, there is this letter that arrives from Antonio telling him that he is in trouble, all his ships have been lost at sea. Now Shylock is demanding his pound of flesh, and a date has been fixed for his trial. So at the opening of this scene, Act 4, Scene 1, Antonio is on trial. Shylock is relentless in his demand for revenge. He refuses the Duke's appeals for mercy. He turns away Bassanio's offer of money. And an impasse seems to have been reached. There is no way forward. The Duke is ready to call off to dismiss the court, when suddenly help appears in the form of Portia and Nerissa. The two young women appear disguised, and they come in carrying a letter of introduction from Bellario from Padua. And Portia then launches into her own appeals, trying to persuade Shylock to show mercy, but Shylock is still adamant in demanding justice. The climax of the scene is reached when Portia, in a dramatic turnaround, reverses the situation, and using Shylock's own logic, using his own arguments, she defeats him. Eventually, Shylock leaves the courtroom humiliated and hurt. We are going to limit our study of the scene to this point. That is, up to the point where Portia manages to thwart Shylock and send him away empty-handed from the courtroom. What follows is lighthearted, and it seems as if the heightened intensity of the trial scene requires some degree of balance, and Shakespeare does that very skillfully. because after Shylock leaves, Antonio and Bassanio try to offer some money to Portia, to Balthazar. And Portia refuses it. She says she's content with having done her job, she's satisfied. But when the two men persist, and almost playfully, Portia then says to Antonio, all right then, I'll accept your gloves. And turning to Bassanio, she says, I'll have your ring. Now, this puts Bassanio in a spot because if you recall, this is the very same ring that Portia herself gave to Bassanio in the immediate aftermath of the casket test. So Bassanio makes a few awkward excuses. He tries not to give it to her, and then ultimately he confesses that this ring is special, that this is something that his wife has given to him, and therefore he cannot part with it. Portia then, in mock annoyance, says, "Oh, this is the way with all men. When they want to refuse you something, the easiest excuse is to say, this is something my wife gave me." And in mock anger, she leaves the courtroom. Shortly after her exit, Antonio talks Bassanio into giving away his ring, and Bassanio readily complies. So at the end of the scene, we have Bassanio taking off his ring, giving it to Gratiano, and sending him after Portia to hand over the ring. A word of caution again, the whole scene is important. Although we will limit our study only to the trial, please remember that this is a vitally important scene and merits careful study. So now our next slide will show us the first extract. These are the opening lines that the Duke speaks. He is addressing Antonio when he says, "I am sorry for thee. Thou art come to answer a stony adversary, an inhuman wretch, incapable of pity, void and empty from any dram of mercy." So in his very opening lines, the Duke establishes the fact that he is biased. He is not an impartial judge. In fact, he sets the tone for the whole trial. It is very clear that his sympathies lie with Antonio, who is a friend, a fellow Venetian. The Duke makes no attempt to hide his mistrust or his dislike for Shylock. Look at the language he uses. He refers to Shylock when he says, "Your adversary is stony, stone-hearted. He's an inhuman wretch, that is, he's less than human. He's subhuman. He's incapable of pity, void and empty of any dram of mercy." And so we see, we wonder how Shylock can even hope to receive mercy or justice at the hands of such a judge. It's interesting also that in his very opening speech, the Duke uses the word mercy. That's the last word in this particular extract, notice. Now, this is a word that is bandied. You hear it repeated over and over again. You hear it on the tongues of the various characters in this scene. And that's what I meant when I said that this scene explores this theme of mercy versus justice. We'll move now to our second extract, where we have Shylock's response. He says, "I have possessed your grace of what I purpose, and by our holy Sabbath have I sworn to have the due and forfeit of my bond. If you deny it, let the danger light upon your charter and your city's freedom." We see a Shylock who is calm here. He's implacable. He speaks in very measured tones, even as he demands his very twisted justice, a pound of Antonio's flesh. Now, all through Act 4, we will find Shylock referencing justice so many times that we lose count. Now, although Shylock is outwardly calm, we know that he's seething inside. He has been sorely provoked by Antonio's behavior. He is also upset by recent events. His own daughter, Jessica, has eloped with Lorenzo, who is a young Christian. And Shylock is convinced that Antonio and Bassanio were involved in helping Jessica to elope. So he is an angry father, an angry businessman, waiting for an opportunity to get back at the people who've hurt him. And this is his perfect opportunity. Shylock is also confident that the law is on his side. Notice the words he uses. If you deny it, let the danger light on your charter, your city's freedom. Later on, he says, if you deny me, then fie upon your law. There is no force in the decrees of Venice. A decree means a law. Now, because Venice's economic stability depends on foreign merchants and businessmen like Shylock, the city has laws in place to protect their rights. So Shylock is referencing this. He's making a very serious charge. He's warning the Duke that if his bond were to be disregarded, if a legal agreement like the one he has entered into with Antonio were to be disregarded, then it would send out a very dangerous message about the Venetian legal system to all the business community. After all, it's a written agreement, and a written agreement is sacrosanct. Denying Shylock's bond would mean that anything in writing could now become worthless. So Shylock is fully aware of the weight of his words when he issues this veiled threat at the Duke. In our next slide, we will see Antonio appealing to Bassanio. You see, when Shylock speaks like this, it angers Bassanio. And he gets into an argument and he debates. The debate goes on rather bitterly between him and Shylock until Shylock says to him, I am not bound to please thee with my answer. And because the two of them are arguing so much, Antonio says, I pray you, think you question with the Jew? So he is addressing this to Bassanio and he says, what's wrong with you? Do you imagine that you can argue with the Jew, that you can persuade him to your way of thinking? And then Antonio goes on to give examples of how futile it is to try and change Shylock's heart. He says you may as well stand on the beach and tell the waves or the tides to lessen or to diminish their height. He says you may as well reason with a wolf and ask the wolf why it has caused distress to a ewe by killing its lamb. You may as well, he says, talk to the forest pines and ask them not to bend and wave in the stormy breezes. So it's as futile as that, trying to reason with Shylock. And then he goes on to say, you may as well do anything most hard as seek to soften that than which, what's harder? His Jewish heart. Therefore, I beseech you, make no more offers, use no farther means, but with all brief and plain conveniency, let me have judgment and the Jew his will. So he says, don't try any more. We understand also that Antonio seems to share the Duke's belief that Shylock has a heart of stone. And he says to Bassanio, don't attempt to soften something that is as hard as that. You will not succeed. What is revealed of Antonio's character in this scene is he comes across as dignified. He sounds weary. The tone is that of someone who's tired. He's weary. He's had enough. He's resigned to his fate. He seems to have accepted that he will not come out of this trial alive. But his manner communicates or portrays a saint. He's almost like a saintly figure, prepared to meet his end. And he says, I'm armed to suffer with a quietness of spirit. I'm reconciled, he says. But despite this seemingly saintly air, what does shine through are his personal prejudices. Let's look again at this extract more carefully. You will notice that he does not address Shylock by name. He uses the word Jew 3 times. So he says, why will you question the Jew, his Jewish heart? Let the Jew have his will. So we understand that his prejudice, his personal prejudice, is very deep rooted. And he does not expect any sympathy from a man such as Shylock. We'll move now to our next slide, our 4th extract. Here we see Shylock speak, and there is this conversation between him and the Duke. Shylock says, if every ducat in 6,000 were in 6 parts, and every part a ducat, I would not draw them. I would have my bond. Basically, what he means, he's just been offered a bigger deal by Bassanio. Bassanio is desperate. And when he's desperate, he gets a little reckless. He has just offered Shylock twice the sum. And Shylock very righteously says, forget twice, even if you give me, 10 times as much, I'm not going to accept it. I will not settle for anything less than my bond. I want my pound of flesh and I will settle for nothing less. And then the Duke says, how shall you hope for mercy, rendering none? Shylock's response is, what judgment shall I dread, doing no wrong? Now, this is the theme of mercy, which lies at the heart of the play. It's also central to this particular scene. You see, in the play, Shylock is representative of the Jewish faith, whereas Antonio, Bassanio, the Duke, all the others, the Venetians, represent the Christian community. And in this scene, we find Judaism, that is Shylock's religion, is associated with the laws of Moses. And it's very strict emphasis on justice and on following the letter of the law. That is, accepting only a literal interpretation of the law. That is how the Jews and Judaism was perceived. Christianity, on the other hand, is shown it's shown in a very favorable light. It is shown with an emphasis on God's mercy, on compassion, and on forgiveness. So in this particular dialogue, we see the two religions are being pitted against each other. The Duke pleading for justice, the Duke astonished how Shylock can insist on his bond, and how does he expect any mercy when he shows no mercy? Shylock, on the other hand, speaking as a good Jew, says, what judgment do I have to fear? I have nothing to dread, I have nothing to fear, because I am doing no wrong. So at this point, we find that an impasse has been reached. There is no way forward. The Duke is outwitted. He, on the one hand, he wants to make every effort to save his friend Antonio. On the other, he realizes that he cannot do anything. Even though he's the Duke, he has no power to stop Shylock from demanding his pound of flesh. So at this point, the Duke actually says that he is preparing to dismiss the court, when suddenly a messenger arrives with good news. He says that there is someone who has arrived from Padua. And this is how Portia is introduced to the scene. You see, the Duke had sent for his good friend Bellario, who is a lawyer in Padua, and the Duke was hoping that Bellario would be able to resolve this very difficult case. So when Bellario does not show up, the Duke is on the verge of dismissing the court. And that's when Portia arrives with a letter of introduction telling the Duke that Bellario is not able to be present, but in his stead, he is sending Portia, who, despite her youth, Portia, of course, is in disguise, and she is under the name of Balthazar. So the letter says Balthazar is young, but he's very wise, and he is conversant with all the details of the case. And so Portia comes in, and she also is ready to plead with Shylock. The next slide shows us Portia's words. So our next extract on the next slide, these are Portia's concluding words in her iconic Quality of Mercy speech. Now, this is one of Shakespeare's most beautiful monologues, and in it, Portia makes a very eloquent plea for mercy. She explains what mercy is. She says why mercy is so important. She says the quality of mercy is not strained. She compares it to the gentle rain. She says it is twice blessed. She lists why mercy is an attribute of kings and of God himself. She says It is a quality that makes the most powerful of people even more powerful. It suits a monarch better than his crown, because the scepter, which is the rod of authority, a symbol of a monarch's authority, and the crown, she says, they symbolize a monarch's earthly power, and they inspire fear and dread. Whereas mercy is an attribute of God, and therefore it is even higher than the power that a scepter wields. And she says mercy is enthroned in the hearts of kings simply because it is a divine attribute. She also points out that in this particular extract, she says, therefore, Jew, though justice be thy plea, consider this, that in the course of justice, none of us should see salvation. So she says, and you notice I've highlighted the words, twice you find the word justice and equally the word mercy being used twice. She says, even though what you seek is just by the letter of the bond, yes, what you ask for is not wrong. But she says, think about this. As you pursue justice, you are not going to find salvation. And what she says is true. Unless justice is tempered with mercy, justice can become very harsh and cruel. She later references the Lord's Prayer when she says, that same prayer that teaches all to render the deeds of mercy. So when we pray for mercy, we say, forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. So she says, it is the very prayer that we pray that teaches us to be merciful. And in this very eloquent manner, she tries to persuade Shylock to see that mercy would be a better option. And then she goes on to say, I've said all of this to try and soften your heart. I want you to understand that mercy is far better than demanding pure justice. If, however, justice is what you want, my hands are tied and I will have to allow you to claim your bond. So Portia's words here implying that she is fair, that she is going to give Shylock what he wants. And it's here that Shylock practically condemns himself. Listen to his words. He says, my deeds upon my head, I crave the law, the penalty and forfeit of my bond. So he's almost reckless. He says, I will face the consequences. I just want my bond. Now, in our next extract, which appears on our next slide, we see Bassanio speaking up. Extract 6 shows us Bassanio in conversation with Portia. The 6th extract, Bassanio says, and I beseech you, I need the next slide, please. And I beseech you, rest once the law to your authority. To do a great right, do a little wrong, and curb this cruel devil of his will. And Portia replies, it must not be. There is no power in Venice can alter a decree established. I've put in this particular exchange because it reveals character in an interesting way. Bassanio has come rushing to be in Venice at Antonio's side. He left on the very day of his marriage to be here for his friend. Now, he's been present in the court from the beginning when the Duke has appealed to Shylock to show mercy. Antonio has warned Bassanio not to debate or argue with Shylock anymore. He's listened to the young lawyer Balthazar also plead with Shylock. And now he reaches a point of impatience. He does not want to listen to any more pleas. So Bassanio's character, his impatience coming through. He says, rest the law to your authority. He's addressing Portia here as Balthazar. He says, take over the law. You're the judge here. You have the power to take the law into your control. To do a great right, do a little wrong. These are again very important words here. Bassanio is urging Portia to manipulate the law. He says, and this reveals his great love for Antonio, because in Bassanio's opinion, the great right, the great good thing that Portia ought to do is save Antonio's life. And then he says, do a little wrong. It doesn't really matter. What is of no consequence? Denying Shylock his bond. So he is dismissive of Shylock and his bond, and he considers them inconsequential. In his opinion, the great good deed of saving Antonio is far more important than granting Shylock his bond or justice to him. It also shows us that Bassanio has no clear knowledge of how the law works. Now let's look at Portia's rejoinder. She says, it must not be, it cannot be. And we see in her words an upright and uncompromising judge. She says, no, I cannot do it. What you say is out of the question. There is no power in Venice, and she says this in the presence of the Duke who is sitting there. She's implying that not even the Duke of Venice has the power to alter the law. No one can alter a decree, a law that is established. So we find that Bassanio's emotional outburst is contrasted rather sharply with Portia's very measured reasoning. And her words raise Shylock's hopes because she implies here that nothing can be done to change the law. Every effort can be made to persuade Shylock, but nothing can be done to alter the law itself. We look now at our next extract. Next extract, we have Portia. And then Portia, in a climactic moment, says, tarry a little, there is something else. This bond doth give thee here no jot of blood. The words expressly are a pound of flesh. So we find that this is the turning point in the case. The entire case turns around here. Once again, we notice a transformation, a remarkable transformation in Portia. She begins when she enters as a young lawyer who pleads most eloquently for mercy. And then she comes across as a seemingly upright, uncompromising, and just lawyer who grants Shylock his suit. And then very quickly, she is transformed into this hard-headed lawyer who relentlessly turns the table around on Shylock, using his own arguments to defeat him. Because she says to him, this bond gives you only a pound of flesh. It does not mention a drop of blood. She quotes when she says the words are a pound of flesh. Now, even as Portia gains control of the situation, Shylock feels the case is slipping away from him. So he begins to realize that he has to make good his losses. He turns to Bassanio and he says, all right, I will take thrice the offer of thrice the money and let Antonio go. It is Shylock's repeated demands for justice and his bond that seal his fate. Look at what he says. He seeks the due and forfeit of his bond. I would have my bond, he says. The pound of flesh that I demand is dearly bought, and I will have it. Later he says, I stand for judgment. I stand here for the law. Now, ironically, it is Shylock who is at the mercy of justice. And this time, Portia refuses to give it to him. Now we'll move on to our next extract, which is incidentally the last extract I have for today, where we have Portia speaking again. She says to Shylock, thou shalt have nothing but the forfeiture, to be so taken at thy peril, Jew. This is directly in response to Shylock's words. Just before this, Shylock asks her, shall I not have barely my principal? So we have a humble Shylock trying to at least get back his initial investment, his 3,000 ducats. So he says to her, will you not at least give me back my principal? And then Bassanio is more than willing to give it to him. But Portia intervenes and she says curtly, she reminds Shylock, for as thou urgest justice, Be assured thou shalt have justice more than thou desired. It's almost as if she's saying, be careful what you ask for. This is what you wanted, now you have it. You deal with it. So you will have nothing but the forfeiture. That is your pound of flesh. And if you take it, you do it at your peril, because she has explained to him that the bond does not allow him a single drop of blood. She also goes on to explain that according to the laws of Venice, and she reads from a document to Shylock, because he says, is that the law? She says, if it is found that a foreigner, an alien, is proved to directly or indirectly conspire against the life of a native Venetian, then the consequences are dire. All of that person, the offender's wealth, his possessions, everything would be taken away. One half would be given to his intended victim, in this case to Antonio. The other half would be retained by the state. And then she goes on, the final straw is, even the offender's life is no longer his own, because he's conspired against a native Venetian. And Portia says, even for your life is in the hands of the Duke. He and he alone can pardon you. So Shylock says, why then the devil give him good of it? I'll stay no longer. He wants to get away. He says, let the devil take Antonio. I wish to leave now. And that's when Portia says, tarry, Jew. You notice how often Portia uses the word tarry. It means wait. Wait, she says earlier. And again, wait, Jew. The law has another hold on you. And this is when she explains the extent or the kind of consequences that Shylock has brought upon his head by his adamant and insistent demand for the law. So in the end, we find Shylock is completely defeated. He is rendered powerless by the very laws that he clung to. And it's only because of the Duke's mercy and Antonio's mercy, small mercy, that he gets away with his life. Otherwise, he loses everything. Antonio gets one half of his wealth. The Duke is given the other half. And Antonio pitches in with two more conditions. He says that in return for this favor, what's the favor? Allowing him to live. In return for this favor, Shylock will immediately have to become a Christian. And he will also have to make a will there in the court, saying that on his death, all his possessions will be passed on to his son, Lorenzo. Lorenzo, if you recall, is the young Christian, young gentleman whom Jessica, his daughter, eloped with. So Shylock is shamed and humiliated, and he is stripped of even his religion. It's interesting to note that although all the characters talk extensively of mercy in this scene, none of them is prepared to show Shylock any mercy. It's interesting that Portia, who spoke at length about the qualities of mercy, when she has an opportunity, does not find it in her heart to show him any mercy. And so at the end of the scene, or at the end of the trial, Shylock is forced to leave, shamed and humiliated, a bitter man, having to swallow the fact that he's not only lost everything that he's set out to get, but also he's lost much, much more. And it's on this note, and it's at this point that we will end our class for today. In the next slide, I would like to give you a few tips on how to answer your English literature paper. The literature paper demands a close study of your texts. What does that mean? You don't need guidebooks. You don't need to look at summaries and paraphrases. You don't need lengthy notes. All you need is your text. Yesterday, I explained that listening to an audiobook will help you consolidate and help you to remember even better. So read your text over and over again, because it's the little details that matter so much. Next, when you're given a question paper, whether in school or your board paper, read your questions carefully and understand what the answer requires of you. The question is worded, the wording is very specific, so you need to be able to arrive at exactly what the examiner is looking for. When you've understood that, keep your answers to the point. It's a myth, both in school as well as in your board exams. Don't believe it when people say, write extensively. The volume does not matter. What matters is that you answer to the point and get your facts right. Now, it is possible that an answer might require you to refer to incidents or events from an earlier scene or perhaps a later scene or an act. For instance, you could be asked, supposing you're given that extract about Portia asking for Bassanio's ring, which happens later in this same scene. You could be asked a question, when and how does Bassanio acquire this ring? Or how does he get this ring? So this is a reference. You need to go back to Act 3, Scene 2 to answer this particular question. You will have to mention that after Bassanio made the right choice, Portia gives him this ring, that it represents her house, her servants, and herself, and that the ring is meant to symbolize Bassanio's love for her. So you see an answer, even though your questions are all reference to context, your answers will not necessarily be limited to that little extract. Your questions can take you back and forth, referencing to that particular extract. Or you could have a question, what promise did Bassanio make when the ring was given to him? So again, there's a promise that he makes. He says, when this ring passed from my finger, let it be said that Bassanio is dead. So again, that's a reference back to Act 3, Scene 2. My final advice to you is never be afraid to give your own views or your opinions, especially when you're asked. Often you will have a question, what do you think? How do you feel about this? Do you think this, last year you had that in your paper. Do you think that the story, that was a little magical, do you think the story ends happily or sadly? So when you're asked for your views, please be confident to share your own opinions, because it matters that you say what you think and what you believe. Of course, you will always have to remember to justify your views with textual references. So those are the tips that I have for you about taking the how to answer your paper. I've put down for you on this slide a few projects, ideas for projects really. And I've mentioned, as I did yesterday, that all projects should be open book projects. What this does, it is that it removes this fear or the need to have to mug up your answers. I've just put down 3 ideas here. The first is use stick figures to create a storyboard out of the events of Act 4, Scene 1. Now this, like I said, is the most dramatic, the most intense scene in the play, and graphic novels are very popular today. I'm sure you've read many graphic novels yourselves. So the idea is that you use simple figures. You see, the point is not art here. You're not being tested on your artistic ability, but on your ability to tell the story in a coherent manner, arranging the events in a chronological sequence. So this would work very well. In fact, even when you're studying, it would help if you make little figures and little stick figures to tell the story in the proper sequence. So that would be one project idea. The second is, I think I really enjoy these newspaper reports, and it works very well. I've done it in the schools that I've taught. Imagine that you are a reporter of a well-known newspaper and write a report of Antonio's trial. Be sure to give your news item a catchy headline and include quotes from others who were present at the trial. So this is a newspaper report. Once again, you keep your textbook open in front of you. You are to report Antonio's trial. Imagine what a dramatic report that would make. This would merit, banner headlines. This would be center page. Antonio, after all, is a wealthy, much loved, much respected merchant of Venice. So you will have to give it a very catchy headline. And the people of Venice would obviously enjoy seeing Shylock thwarted. Include quotes from others who were present at the trial. And remember, the language you use should be everyday English, English that you and I speak today. So that would also make an important, interesting assignment. The last one is a popular idea, the question of Shylock. Is he a villain or is he a victim of the system? This is much debated. You would, of course, base your answer on the entire text. You would look at Shylock, his speeches, his very, very powerful speeches. You would look at his treatment, how Antonio and Bassanio and the others speak to him, how they treat him, and you will decide, is he a victim? Is he perhaps, has he been made a villain because of the way in which he has been treated? So you are welcome to either treat him either as a villain, as a despicable man whose malevolent intent is simply to take the life of a merchant of Venice, or you can see him as a victim. Equally, you could say that it is a bit of both. So this is an answer that you would arrive at, and here your own perspective is what would make all the difference. So all the best. These are just a few ideas for assignments and projects. I'm just coming back to my main screen now. All right, so now we will have our question and answer session. Your first question is up. Why has the Duke sent for Bellario? Now, Bellario we understand from the Duke's words that he is a learned doctor of law. He lives in Padua. The Duke is now aware that Shylock is determined to have his pound of flesh. The Duke wants to make every effort to save his friend Antonio. He realizes he does not have what it takes to argue this case. He needs the expertise of an experienced lawyer, and that is why the Duke has sent for Bellario. Can we have our next question? Yes, what is an epitaph? Why does Antonio want Bassanio to write his epitaph? Now, an epitaph is an inscription on a tombstone or on a gravestone. Usually it says in a few words, it captures the life of a person, and an epitaph usually says very flattering, very good things about the person who is now dead. Now, there is a point in Act 4 where Bassanio says, I shall have my flesh, he says, Shylock can have my flesh, my blood, and my bones before a drop of Antonio's blood is shed. So when Bassanio makes this very passionate speech, Antonio says to him, it's better that you stay alive. It's all right. It's okay if I die at Shylock's hands, but I would like you to remain alive. And then he gives Bassanio this task. He says, it's good if you are alive and you write an epitaph for me. You write my epitaph. Okay, who was Daniel? Can you explain the reference to Daniel? Yes, of course. So Daniel was a biblical character. He was noted for his judgment when he was a very young man. Interestingly, this name Daniel is also it is of Hebrew origin, and it means God is my judge. So perhaps Shylock was invoking the biblical Daniel, or maybe he was just using the name to say, God is on my side, God be my judge, I am simply asking for my bond. So that would be the reference to Daniel. Why does the Duke address Portia, that is Balthazar, as learned doctor when she appears in court? Yes, this is often, this tends to confuse, because today we understand the word doctor to mean a medical doctor, a physician, or a surgeon, or whatever, someone whom we go to when we are sick. But here, the Duke is referring to Portia as learned doctor because Portia has been introduced as a doctor from Rome. That is an expert in the law, a doctor of law is who she is. So that is why the term has been used to describe Portia. All right, why is Shylock not happy when the Duke pardons his life? If you remember, at the time when the Duke pardons Shylock's life, he has lost everything. He's just learned from Portia that his wealth, his goods will be confiscated, and part of it would be given to Antonio, another part to the state. So Shylock, and it's only on the Duke's mercy that he is allowed to live even. So Shylock says bitterly, "Why do you want to give me my life? Take even that." You see, Shylock is a moneylender by occupation. So if all his wealth is gone, what livelihood is he left with? And so we find that he's not overjoyed at having his life spared. Instead, he is bitter and angry, and it is this bitterness that is reflected in the words that he speaks. Is it okay to say that we feel sorry for Shylock if we are asked to comment on the treatment meted out to him at the end of the trial? Yes, of course. Yes, because you see, what we see in Act 4, Scene 1 is basically an act of bullying. The whole lot of them against one solitary man. He's shamed, he's humiliated, he leaves the court not just empty handed, but with less than what he comes. He's stripped of his livelihood, he's stripped of his religious beliefs, he's even stripped of his dignity. So, yes, you may go ahead and say that you do feel sorry for him. It's acceptable. Why does Portia refuse to have dinner with the Duke? Yes, after the trial and Shylock has left the court, the Duke prepares to leave himself, and as a courtesy, he invites Portia to dine with him. Portia replies that she needs to be back in Padua that same night. So this is the reason that she offers to the Duke. But we know that she is in a hurry to return to Belmont. She and Nerissa need to get back to Belmont before their respective husbands return. So that is what she has planned, and therefore she refuses to have dinner with the Duke. All right, why does Portia ask for Bassanio's ring? Yes, of course, this is the lighter part of Act 4, Scene 1. In the aftermath, when after the Duke leaves, he says to Antonio, "You should reward this young man." And Antonio and Bassanio try to give her something. She refuses it all, saying she's content with having done her job. And earlier in the play, at one point in this particular scene, Bassanio says, he says that he's prepared to give up his life and his very dear wife also, if that's what it took to save Antonio's life. Now, these words of his displease Portia naturally. And so perhaps almost playfully on her way out, she says to Antonio, she says, "I will accept your gloves." And then turning to Bassanio, she says, "Give me your ring." She's basically testing her husband. He was, of course, he didn't know his wife was present to hear the words, but he was willing to sacrifice his wife, to give up her life. So here she is putting his love to the test when she asks for his ring. Why does Bassanio give away his ring? Yes, that's also interesting because soon after Portia leaves the courtroom in a fit of anger, or so it seems, Antonio speaks to Bassanio. He just says, "Let him have the ring. Let his deservings and my love withal be valued against your wife's commandment." So it's in direct response to these words of Antonio's. Antonio says, "This judge has done so much. He saved my life. If you care for me and if you want to show respect to this judge who saved my life, put both those things, weigh them against your wife's commandment. You've made your wife a promise. I'm sure she'll understand. Why don't you give your ring away?" And therefore Bassanio gives away the ring. Yes, I think we have the last question for the day. Does mercy triumph over justice in The Merchant of Venice? It doesn't, does it? Because you see, Every one of the characters has an opportunity to show mercy. Shylock is asked repeatedly, first by Antonio, then the Duke, by Bassanio, by Portia, the young lawyer. Every time he's asked to show mercy, he adamantly refuses. Portia herself, interestingly, although she speaks at length about the qualities of mercy, she has none to spare for Shylock. Antonio could have shown Shylock some mercy, but it is he who comes up with this particularly cruel punishment. He insists that Shylock abandon his Jewish faith and become a Christian, that Shylock leave his wealth to Lorenzo, who is a Christian. So, throughout the play, most of the characters talk about mercy, but when it comes to the test, they all find it difficult to forgive Shylock. Overall, the only mercy that you see in the play is the fact that Shylock is allowed to live, the fact that he is not put to death. That's the only mercy that we see in the play. So I think that sums up the play, wraps up today's session. So I'll close with a word of thanks again to the council for organizing these sessions. Thanks also to the technical team for all their effort to keep things flowing smoothly. And a message for all of you out there from the council. Remember to wash your hands often, sanitize your hands, wear a mask when you're in the company of others, and maintain social distance at all times. Thank you very much and have a good day.